this is we've had to, there are times like we want to talk about pricing, for example, but we have an entire course on pricing. So we hold that off until we're on that session. We touch on a little bit. Some of the information is repetitive because we want to emphasize points. So bear with us on that. So in this session, we're going to do the desk research and market research. In 2020 and in the age that we live in now, 2021 and 2, doing desk research and looking at the materials online and being able to research what a market opportunity is without leaving your desk is easy. The internet, like I've mentioned before, will allow you to tell what's in a retail store. So not only are you able to judge and look at what the global trends are from the statistics that are available online, you're also able to look at individual transactions and individual customers. Back when I started in the business back in the 1980s, we would get a newspaper once a week that had some of the data in it, and we'd have to drill through the newspaper and spend hours trying to find something of interest of the data and statistics. Now that information is all online. So today we'll talk about the different avenues and tools out there for research online. We'll talk about what they mean and how to understand what and interpret them and understand what to do with them. And that leads us to the plan, developing a plan of the next steps to ultimately get to the market. A lot of times customers want to, and our customers in develop, want to skip the research and go right to the marketing. And unless they're lucky or they already know the markets, that's a gamble, because without doing the research, you're only guessing on what the opportunities are. So it's best to make sure that your foundation is built, the research is done before advancing to the next step and trying to find customers and trying to market. A lot of times people will go to a trade show sponsored by a development agency or a government agency promoting exports, and it's not the right trade show for them because they haven't done their market research or they have the wrong product. They're bringing a retail product to a food service store or show, or they're bringing retail product to an ingredient show or ingredients to a retail show. So choosing the right show and finding the right customers all begins with the research that we'll touch upon tonight. So export research methodology, and I've been doing this research, like I say, since the 80s, and the system and the styles of how we do the research has changed, but the basics remain the same. And you need to understand the market, and you can look at data and you can look at statistics, but the most important thing is to listen to the market, to listen to your customers. We talk a little bit about packaging in one of the other sessions. And one of the things about packaging is everybody designs a package and then goes to the market. When we had our own export business, we would go to the market and say, I'm going to do a canned corn or a canned cola. What do you think about the label? Here's 3 or 4 different label designs, and let your customers give you feedback. That's also part of the research methodology. And now with digital images and everything else, it's so much easier than it used to be. And everybody does it a little bit differently. And I could spend a month teaching about all the different tools that are out there, and different tools for different markets, different data, and sometimes the data conflicts with each other because not all data sources are accurate. So you have to take them all with, we say, a grain of salt or with a little understanding and interpret what you think the data is saying, and that becomes the art. The science is getting the data. The art is interpreting it. So the objective of this course is to know how to do the research and to be able to apply it. And the idea is to develop a business plan. And for export marketing, the business plan really evolves around the product, and this research will help you identify that product. We'll talk about using the internet and how to use the internet to get the resources. And there's also, like say, we'll get in more details, the personal visits or the resources online or in your network with your buyers and potential buyers being the best source of information. We'll talk about buyer data. There's different levels of data, and we'll talk about what the buyer data means. We'll talk about seller data. So there's the information that they gather from the buyers and the information that they gather from the sellers. And then finally, we'll work on building a plan. And all of these, we talked about in the first session, Charm Dance, which was the basic skills of international business, and all of those apply throughout here. So we'll touch upon those briefly. So the basic thing that you want to figure out is what is currently moving, what is currently being exported from your country, and where is it going? That'll give you a foundation. But a lot of times, and we talked about this last time, one of the products that has a greater export opportunity may not be a historical export. It may be something that's produced locally and consumed locally. Or in agriculture, it may be something that's not even produced at all because there is no domestic market. We did that with asparagus in Peru, where Peruvian consumption of asparagus did not exist until we looked at the agricultural conditions, looked at the market, and determined their competitive advantage, determined that the market had demand, they had ability to produce it. Blueberries is another example. There's a lot of countries now producing blueberries that 10 years ago did not produce them. And so if you look strictly at the statistics, you're going to say, oh, no blueberries are exported. Lack of proof doesn't mean that there's lack of opportunity. So you have to, again, look at the statistics and apply those to agriculture, apply those to what can be produced, and figure out, how the statistics relate. But the statistics, finding the numbers is the best place to start. You can also determine trade customers and patterns and flows. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. So if there's something that's already being exported, we always say in another one of our courses, find out what the market leader is doing and copy them. So if somebody else is exporting blueberries or tomatoes or apricots, chances are you can do it too. So you don't need to come up with something nobody else is doing. It's proven that you can export those products from the statistics. So don't try and immediately do something different. Now, what we like to do is figure out if everybody's doing apricots and we can do apricots, we start trading apricots. Apricots then pay the bills. Apricots then get us the experience throughout our organization on how to prepare for export. Then we start looking at alternative products, a value-added apricot, and we'll talk about that, for example. But you start with something that's a foundation. So when you're looking at the businesses as a consultant, you're trying to look for what is the one product that's going to sell on a regular basis. When I had my export business, I had cola. We had our own brand of cola that we exported. And every week we were exporting cola. We didn't have to make money on it because it opened the door for other products to those customers. So, we understood what the cola did for us. It's called a loss leader. It brings the customers to us and leads them into us. We may lose money on it, but at the end of the day, we actually make money because it brings the customer and develops a dialogue, gives us the skills. So there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. Find out what is currently being exported by looking at the statistics. How does that then apply to your business? So in researching foreign markets, it's different from researching your domestic market. I'd like to think there's probably a lot more information available on the export markets, particularly in a country like Turkmenistan, where domestic information may be limited. You can access the international databases. You can identify the markets. You can prioritize which markets go after. And again, sometimes it's the market that has the largest volume, and sometimes it's the market with the smaller volume. The largest volume is going to be a competitive market. Everybody's trying to sell to them. The smaller markets may have unmet demand. So just again, because they're the largest importer of a certain product doesn't mean they're going to be the best importer for you. Depends on your competitive and comparative advantage. Can you be competitive? So in doing the market research, you get down to looking at competitive conditions and pricing. It's difficult to look at pricing unless you understand the markups. And we have a course strictly on pricing. To understand the markups, I had situations where we would take producers to the market where we were selling export product. They would see what the product sold at retail and then try and raise their price because the retail price was 3 or 4 times what they were selling to us. They didn't understand the difference and the channels and how many hands and how many times that product turned to get there. So if you look strictly at an export or a retail price, it doesn't tell you what your export price should be. If your price is too high, then you know you don't have a starting point. But if your price is lower than that, doesn't mean you can raise your price because you don't understand all of the channels it goes through. So we'll talk about that briefly here. We'll talk about it more later on. Doing research beyond the statistics, you'll want to look at consumer trends. You know, every day of the week, I get at least one email, sometimes 3 or 4, from different trade industry organizations where they are publishing articles on trends, or they're publishing articles on who is doing what in the industry. It's those services, those press releases, a lot of times are free, the subscriber newsletters, and getting those and focusing on your industry. So if I'm doing dried fruit, I want to subscribe to every public newsletter that talks about dried fruit, and I want to review it so I understand what's happening. So the politics of issues and the legal factors, we'll talk about customs clearance in another session as well, but the politics can change the market immediately. So in the research, the first question you have to ask, is there demand for the product that I produce? Or should I produce a different product? Statistics will tell you, for example, that Europe is a large consumer of melons, particularly watermelon. That's what the statistics say. But it doesn't mean there's necessarily an opportunity for the melon that you're producing in Turkmenistan or Uzbekistan or Kazakhstan or any of the Central Asian regions, because it's a different kind of melon. So the statistics may say, hey, this is great, let's go sell our melons. But at the end of the day, it's not the same thing. So you need to determine, is it a different product or is it the same product? Are your competitors exporting? If your neighbor is selling product into a market, there's no economic factors that would stop you from selling the product. You need to determine, does my government allow the export of the product? Is there a chance that we start exporting and then the government changes the ability to export it to protect the domestic market? If I'm a buyer, I don't want to buy from somebody whose government can step in and change the export opportunities. Because if I'm counting on a product from a country and they no longer can export it because they're protecting the domestic markets, I'm hurting. I got to get my supplies someplace else. So one of the challenges that you'll have to answer is, what is the government's position on your exporting this product? Can it always happen? As I mentioned last time, we were working with Uzbekistan when the government decided all exports had to go by rail. Stopped exports immediately. Nobody was prepared for that. So that was a government move that changed things immediately, and it really made it difficult for the exporters to continue to develop their business, because the importers were reluctant because they had been burned before by factors beyond the market. Do I have the ability, and does your client have the ability to meet increased demand? Again, it doesn't make sense to go sell product and find out that you don't have enough raw materials. So that's why in the earlier sessions, we talked about doing the review and the SWOT analysis on the raw materials. Do you have enough to meet the demand? Is enough available? We're working with a new product out of Tajikistan that they can only do about 18 tons a year. Well, that doesn't help me when I go in and talk to a retailer and they want 250 tons. So that's a product we've had to scale back on and say the opportunities are there, but we need to get the volumes up. So when you're looking at a market, you need to, again, as we talked about, start at the 30,000 foot level. What are the general economic conditions of the market? If the economy is booming, then chances are their imports are strong. If the economy is struggling, doesn't mean their imports are bad, because they still need to import food, particularly, but it changes the way that they deal with things. So you need to understand what their general economic position is. We were looking at, for example, selling Georgian wine to Europe. Well, in Germany, the Germans drink German wine. In France, the French drink French wine. In Italy, they drink Italian wine. So it makes it very difficult for a new supplier to come in and sell wine. And we were able to find an opportunity in Europe because at the time, the UK, they don't have a wine industry. So they were willing to look at the other opportunities, at other sources. The other thing we were able to do is sell bulk wine to the Italian, Germans, French, and Spanish to blend with their own local production. So we weren't able to sell at the retail level, but we were able to sell at the ingredient level where they would blend it. And then the Italians bought Italian wine that was fortified with Georgian wine. So we had to change the product that they were selling. The exporters had to determine, do I want to sell bulk, where I'm not getting the value add of doing a label and a brand, but I'm moving my product? That's a decision that the exporter needs to make. And that's why in the SWOT analysis, we need to analyze what are the management's objectives. If the management's objectives are strictly to build a brand, to build their image and to build the brand and the label, then looking at the opportunities for bulk isn't going to go anywhere. If they're looking to move the capacity of their factory, and their factory or their production facilities, the equipment that they have costs the same whether they produce 1 can of product a day or 1,000 cans of product a day, as long as the capacity is there. So if the manufacturer is looking at how do I lower my marginal cost, how do I produce more product with the fixed asset, then doing private label or doing bulk may be an answer for them. What is the size of the market that you're looking at? Is the market growing? It's very, very difficult to sell product in a market that is shrinking, in a market where the demand for that product is no longer there. In food, there are times when certain products come in, are very popular, they hit a peak, and then they disappear. A good example of that is carrot juice. Back around 2000, the Japanese market loved carrot juice. And every producer in California that could make carrot juice started making carrot juice. People invested in new factories, new capacity. Then the Japanese no longer wanted carrot juice. So these factories, in fact, one of them was just auctioned off the other day because they could not keep their business open because they built to a trend. Pomegranate juice is one where there has been a trend. People have forecast that it will not continue, but it's remained strong. There are pomegranate orchards being planted in countries that have never produced pomegranates before. As that product hits the market, floods the market, the supply goes up, the price goes down. So is there things within the market that will change? Is the growth of the market going to continue, or is it going to retract? When we're looking at the data that we'll show you today and how to do the research, you want to look at who the main competitors are. Who else outside of your country, who else is shipping into that market, and what are their motivations? What are their competitive advantages? Are they closer? Do they harvest the crop sooner or later? What is their situation? And then you have to monitor that. With onions into Europe in 2019, Europe had a problem with their onion crop, so they were importing. The exporters that caught that early were able to get contracts before the markets went up and were able to capitalize. And what market segments does your market consist of? In food, we're lucky because food has multiple markets for the same product. They have obviously the retail market, and that's one that everybody gets excited about because they want to see their brand on the shelf. And development agencies love to say that we got product into this retailer or that at the retail shelf. But there's also the ingredient business, which is less familiar and less popular with the press, but it still moves a lot of product. So instead of selling a canned tomato, selling bulk tomato paste actually moves more product and costs less per kilo or less per pound to move it, because you're selling it to somebody who's going to put their brand on it, own the inventory, do the marketing, do the distribution. So the ingredient industry is a great avenue that a lot of times companies and consultants don't look. They're always looking at the retail. How do I get my brand name in front of the consumer? And unless the owners are doing it for their ego and they want to move product, the industrial business is a good way to go. A third market is the food service industry, which is the hotels and restaurants, schools, prisons, hospitals. It's everything that's consumed outside of the home. And when I buy something at a restaurant, I have no idea what the country of origin is. I have no idea who the supplier is or the brand. I don't care. The chef or the corporate chef or the buyer is controlling the quality of that product. They're controlling it through doing their own testing, their own sampling, and they're choosing what product best fits their profile of price, quality, and value. So if I have a product that is good in quality and competitive in prices, so there's a good value in it, going after the food service industry is easier and less expensive than going after the retail industry. Going after retail, I have to convince housewives or the shopper to buy the brand. And they buy one can and they may not buy another can or bottle of that product for 3 weeks, 6 months, whatever. In the food service industry, if a chef starts using your tomato paste in his pasta, he's going to use that for months. And he's going to use it until something better comes along, better being cheaper, more consistent quality, or better lead time on receiving the product. So once you establish the food service business, it's much more loyal as long as you can maintain the quality. So when you're looking at the businesses, where can that product move to? Retail, food service, industrial. We were working on a dried mango project for USAID. We were called in late on the project, and they'd hired a consultant to develop a dried mango. He went in, taught him how to develop a dried mango, but it tastes terrible. The quality was terrible. It would have been okay if it was certified organic, but it wasn't. It had coloring added to it and preservatives. Not a good product at all. But there was a lot of pressure to move this dried mango. And believe it or not, the only market that we found here in the US was for pet food. To sell it at the pet food store or the pet store for people to feed their pets. It wasn't the original idea for the product. Of course, the government and all the producers wanted to see their product at the retail shelves in Costco and Walmart and Aldi and Carrefour and Metro, but their quality wasn't there. Their quality was a different level. Their price was competitive going into the pet food industry, so we were able to develop that. So it's a segment that was completely beyond what they were looking at. And so what are the segments? How can that same product be moved someplace else? So at the end of the day, the consumer drives the business. And next time when we talk about the value chain, people talk about supply chain and value chain. And we at 2020 like to consider it the demand chain. Everything starts with demand. If there is demand, product will be produced. So you have to determine why the demand of the consumer is. So when you're doing the research, you're looking and trying to get into the Mind the consumer. What is their motivation for buying the product? What are their needs? What is unmet? What products are they currently buying? What brands? We talk about finding the brand that is currently selling. And if all of the dried mango is selling in a, just to pick a color, a blue box, I don't want to come out with a red box. I'm going to come out with a blue box. We did cola, our own brand of cola, and we used a red can. Cola has nothing to do with the color red. It's not red. Cola is not red color, but Coca-Cola is red. So when people buy cola, they're looking for a red can. So we found out what the market leader was doing and we copied it. So when you're doing the research, for your clients, use the snip and take pictures of product, say, here is what is currently selling. Here is the brands that are on the market. How much money will the consumer spend, and are they willing to spend in your product category? There is data out there on consumer preferences. And how much are they spending, and what are the alternatives? If I can't buy a dried mango, will I buy a dried apricot? It's a good question. So the consumers understanding what their options are. If I can't buy whole tomatoes, will I buy canned tomatoes? Or at what price do I not make my own spaghetti sauce, and do I buy canned spaghetti sauce? So there's triggers that motivate that, and you can see some of that online, and you can get more of that information when you talk directly with your customers. You don't have to spend the money to do a consumer survey. That's very expensive, hundreds of thousands of dollars to get consumer feedback, but you can get buyer feedback. And you can look at what the market is moving to online to understand what the consumers are preferring. And the other is to understand what information the consumer needs to know about your product. I listened to a webinar today from a retail marketing expert here in the US. And one of the points that she said is that you need to understand what the customer wants before they ask it. And I've talked about that before. You need to anticipate the questions. So you need, as a consultant, you need to put your put your sellers into the mind of the customer. It doesn't matter what you like, it matters what the customers like, and that's something you have to convince them. This slide really just kind of echoes some of the other information we talked about, is an understanding what your competitors are doing, how they're doing it. We talked last time, there was a question about payments in advance, where the Turkmenistan companies require a 100% payment in advance. If your competition is offering 30-day terms, why would the customer buy from you? He can buy with 30-day terms from somebody else. So you need to understand what the competition is doing. This is not going to be statistics and data you're going to find online. You're going to find that by talking to your customer. You're going to find that by visiting the trade shows or visiting webinars or whatever it takes to try and find out what the customers and what the competition is doing. What is the problem with the brands that are out there? What are they not meeting as far as consumer demand? Is the size of the package too big, too small, not enough of the product packaged together? Is the product inside the package too big or too small? If it's too big, the consumer will not buy it again. If it's too small, they'll not buy it again. So what is, and you can tell, I can go online right now and tell you the size of dried apricots or tomatoes in the market. How is it packaged? So again, find out what the market leader is doing and copy them. How effective are their marketing campaigns? Globally, marketing campaigns are booming with the internet and Instagram and Facebook and WhatsApp. And a good example of that is today I looked up online for a product on my computer. 10 minutes later, I had an ad for that product on my phone. There are services that do that. One of our businesses in our family utilizes one of those services. So if somebody searches for a keyword, and then the next thing they're doing, they're looking at a weather report or their local sports team report, our ad will show up on that website. Those are expenses, and you need to figure out what is the competition doing. There are companies in India that have consumer loyalty programs. There are companies everywhere that have consumer loyalty programs, but in India, there are companies that when I buy a product from a retailer, I get points, and I can use those points to buy things, or to, the biggest point is they get a vacation trip somewhere if they save up all their points, so it builds loyalties. The distributor expects the exporter or the brand owner to pay for that. So you need to understand that. I am a big fan of finding the niche product. How do you make your product different? And how do you stay on top of that? Here in the United States, there is a company called Melissa's Produce. And Melissa's Produce was the first company in the United States to effectively market the kiwi. And prior to that, the kiwi was known as the Chinese gooseberry. And there was no real market because the American consumers didn't know how to eat this fuzzy fruit. And they were very fuzzy. And now they've bred some of the fuzz off on them. But what this lady did with her business is she started bringing it in and started sampling it at the retail stores and teaching people how to consume the product. So for a number of years, she was able to be the only person bringing in this product, this kiwi. Then as competition came in, she got out of the business because there was too much competition. Everybody could bring it in. But for a number of years, she made a very large profit because she had a niche product. It was different. Say on the kiwi, they went from having a very fuzzy green product to now there's a smooth skinned yellow product. So it's changed, and the staying on top of those trends. The yellow came in as a niche. One of my family members the other day brought kiwi berries. They're about the size of a grape, but they're a kiwi, a niche. And on that niches, people are not buying them because they're the cheapest. They're buying them because they're available and unique. So if you can find something that's unique, that ties back to the payment terms. If I'm the only one offering the yellow kiwi, I can require cash in advance if the demand is there. But if I'm offering a green fuzzy kiwi along with everybody else, I have a difficult time offering those terms unless I'm willing to lower my price to the point that the buyer feels his risk is covered. So finding that niche, and when you're looking at a business, we talked last time about the 3 levels of the company assessment: an online assessment, a walk through their factory, and a visit with the management. On the walk through the factory is where we can identify new equipment or new opportunities that they may not even realize are there. So. I'm going to give you some time to kind of absorb this slide. It's a very busy slide. When we're developing slides, we like to keep things short and sweet with only a few points on them. This is breaking all the rules of doing a presentation, but this is the process of doing the market research. So I'll give you a second to read that. I do encourage you, this, along with all the other materials, is online at the university, so you can access it there as well. But this talks about the various steps. Now I'm going to go ahead and start talking again, and you can keep reading it as we go. But again, you start very general and you work your way down to specifics. And the bottom line here, step number 6, is the report and the recommendations. It's the E in charm dance, the execution. None of this makes any sense if you don't have a plan to execute it and to move the next step to take the action. What should we do now that we know that this product is moving to this market and it's this size? How do we capture that market share? How do we develop a product and a customer relationship? So, one of the things that the consultants can do, a lot of times they can gather the information, but they don't come up with an action plan, or they come up with an action plan that is not in reality with what the company can do. So that's why during the assessment of the SWOT analysis and stuff, you need to find out what is the limiting resources, what's preventing them from accomplishing their objectives. As a consultant, you try and find solutions for that. You don't have to be the biggest company to be able to have the greatest success in export. You just have to have the right strategy and the right products. So there are 4 pillars for export trade data. And we're going to talk about the first 3 today. The network and Envision, we'll talk about that in another session. But public data is defined as basically data that is available to the public based on public records. It's available to the public. In some countries, it's free. In other cases, you have to pay for it. And the level of detail in that varies from country to country, but it's publicly available. It's you can pay a service fee, and we'll talk about that. That takes the masses, the billions of records of imports, and boils it down to allow you to analyze what that actually means. Seller data is data from the seller. So what is the competition doing? What are they selling? And you can gather that from their website. If you have a business and you have not visited your competitor's website, then you're missing understanding what they do. What is their strength? What are they selling? How are they selling it? What is the key points that they're going after the consumer? So the seller data, it's not free because they're not going to tell you, but it is free because they've posted it in a lot of places to try and promote their business. Buyer data is not typically free. That is the data that says, I, as a retailer, have bought this product and I've sold it. So it's a lot of times we call it scan data. It's data that has gone across their cash register scan, and it's very expensive. The retailers use it to plan their purchases and to plan their sales and their marketing. They will sell it because it's a revenue source for them, but they're not going to sell it for cheap because it gives away a lot of confidential information. It's very specific, and it'll tell you how frequently an individual candy bar is sold, or how frequently, in some cases, it'll go as deep as to say how many times a particular consumer class or group buys a product. Retailers here in the US and Europe know how many times they're in Japan, know how many times their consumers shop. They know how many times they buy tomato paste and how many times they buy fresh tomatoes. That helps them manage their business. You can buy that data from a number of different services, but it's not cheap. It's not necessarily something you're going to want to do as a starting exporter or advise your exporter to buy the data. It gets to a lot of details that first you need to see if you can be competitive, and then you can start marketing your product in that. Networking and vision. Vision, I can't train you and can't teach you, and I can't tell you what it is. That's, again, the art. As I say, we're all artists, but not all of us can sell our pictures. Same thing with the vision and analyzing this data is we can all analyze it, but we can't all determine what the greatest opportunity of it is. Networking is critical. Again, it's the end and charm dance, and it's how do we network within our group and find data and find information. And the important thing within your network is to listen. There's a very famous American interviewer that says, I never learned anything when I'm asking the question or when I'm talking. He learns when he listens. So you need to work with your network. And a network is broad. It includes truck drivers and freight forwarders and everybody else that is involved in your industry. That information is free, and some of us are better at networking than others, but it's critical. So international public data, international trade data is available through a lot of different sources. Primarily relating to export statistics is driven by import taxes and regulations and tracking imports. And we'll go through the process and how that works. So customs agencies, US Customs, German Customs, EU Customs, Hong Kong Customs, everybody has data on what is coming into their ports and into their airports. They collect this data. In most cases, the data that they collect is free. It's available to the public if you know where it's at and you have the time to analyze it. So customs agencies, typically the information they get is accurate, though not always, and we'll talk about that. Export promotion agencies within governments, most governments will have export promotion agencies to promote product. They'll know what is moving because they're working with their offices within the country that you're exporting to. And there are some countries that have import promotion agencies. Japan is one. They have JETRO, which is Japanese External Trade Organization. Great source for what is selling into Japan, and they help companies sell their product into Japan. There are a couple of countries within Europe that do the same, that help people sell into Europe. The United States does not do that effectively because we're trying to export, not import. So there's really no government agency here promoting imports. Japan promotes imports because Japan wants to promote exports. And the more somebody imports from them, the more they can export. But find out what export agencies are there, what trade organizations, what market data. Again, there's a number of newsletters that come out daily or weekly that you can sign up for that will have market data. Find out what's happening. External data. There are terminals, for example, on produce that publish their, what was received in a day. NGOs and development agencies, they also promote international trade and development. You're obviously familiar with that. And internet search. You can spend years searching the internet and finding more information on your markets. It is critical that you confirm or back up the data that you find, because not everything on the internet is true. But from trade data, there's really not a lot of reason not to accurately report it. And UN trade data. So internal agencies, customs agency, export promotion funds. External data is the NGOs, the internet, and again, the United Nations trade data. Now there's multiple ways of capturing trade data. The most accurate is when the importing company or country clears customs on the import side. United Nations backs that data up with export data so that they can see that country A is exporting to country B and it cleared through customs. Not all countries report export data. I think Turkmenistan is one that does not report their export data. So what they'll do then is what's called mirrored data. They'll see what's being imported and then they'll be able to see on the bill of lading where it's coming from. So they use that number to calculate it. So here's a brief video on Incoterms, which is the starting point to make sure that we're looking at the right information. So.
My name is Othman Al-Alawi. I'm a US and Canadian customs specialist. Today, we'll be discussing two topics, HS codes and Incoterms. HS codes is a harmonized system that is developed and maintained by the World Customs Organization. The HS code is an internationally recognized code. It's a 10-digit code for which the first 6 are international and the remaining 4 are specific to each country of import. It has 5,000 commodity groups. Those groups have 99 chapters, and those chapters have 22 sections. The HS system is used by over 200 countries and other economies around the world for the collection of international trade statistics, but most importantly, as a basis of customs tariffs. Over 98% of the goods involved in international trade are classified in terms of HS codes. In addition to governments, the code is also used to monitor, update, and optimize controlled goods, internal taxes, quota controls, trade policies, transport statistics, just to name a few. The HS code is regarded as an indispensable tool for international trade, universal economic language, and decoding for commodities. HS codes are used at the time of clearance to let customs know what is the nature of the import. It is important and critical to be able to correctly determine what is the correct code. To be able to do that, the 99 chapters are used. To be able to know which chapter is to be used, the chapter has a subject header. For example, if we would customs clear a plastic food container, we would look for the chapter which involves plastic. This chapter is chapter 39. We would use the subheadings to be able to correctly classify in a 10-digit code. It is really important to be able to find that correct code as customs regularly audits importers. If an importer uses the wrong code, customs might think it's misleading and will say it's a misdeclaration, and the importer will be penalized monetarily. So an importer I used to clear for example, didn't want to listen to my advice concerning the correct code to be used. He was adamant about using his own code, which I thought was wrong. 4 years after, customs audited his importer file, and they came back with huge monetary penalties because every import he has done into the country was wrong. There was a difference of 8% in duty, so the importer was now obligated to pay the difference in duty that was not initially paid at time of import. If we would take all those duty amounts and multiply them by the number of years, the company can go bankrupt, and I have personally seen it. If an importer is unsure of the codes to use, the importer can always ask for a ruling from customs, or ask their customs broker to be able to help them identify what the correct goods are. Another subject I'd like to discuss today are Incoterms. Both are really important and critical to an import operation. So Incoterms respond to certain commercial management issues. The difficulty in this type of commercial transaction comes from distance, the exchange of risks, and supply delays, especially from the absence of international laws allowing to clearly define the rights and duties of each party. Incoterms were therefore invented to propose a common framework to share responsibilities and to facilitate communication and especially understand each party's responsibilities. The choice of an Incoterm is not obligatory, but strongly recommended in the establishment of a sales contract. Any dispute or damage resulting from a bad choice of Incoterm has an impact on the image of the company, but also on the transaction itself. There are a couple risks that can come with choosing a wrong Incoterm. A couple of which are the non-adequacy of Incoterms in the transport used, the incompatibility of the chosen Incoterms with a financing contract, the non-adequacy between the Incoterm used and the obligations of customs clearance at the importer's charge, delays in making the goods available for the buyer, a total loss of the goods at the buyer's risk, lack of documents that do not allow the goods to be cleared through customs, so on and so forth. There are a couple examples of Incoterms I can talk to you about today. We have about 4 to 5 Incoterms that are regularly used. You have FOB, which is free on board, CIF, DDP, and Ex Works. For example, the FOB Incoterm is one of the most commonly used Incoterm in international sales. When working under FOB, the seller is responsible until the goods are loaded onto the vessel at the port of origin. This means you have very little control over shipping times and costs. So each Incoterm has specific transfer responsibility from buyer to seller. So it is really important that both the HS codes and the Incoterms used at time of clearance are correct.
So one of the things he talked about there was using the wrong HS code. And when I was an exporter, we had a customer in Japan that used the wrong HS code for canned corn. He did it intentionally. He brought in canned corn, and the code number that he used was that for feed corn, for field corn that is used to feed livestock. Much lower duty rate. And he did that for a couple of years until he got caught. When he got caught, he ended up going bankrupt because, as Othman said, he then had to pay the back fees and its duties. So having the correct HS code is critical from a tax standpoint. From a data research standpoint, it's critical as well because we may be looking up or researching the wrong product. So we start doing the research at a very general level and then drill down. As he said, there's 6 codes to be specific on the product. And some products have their very specific HS code and others do not. For years, quinoa, which was the product we mentioned earlier that we took from the red quinoa from 0 sales to $160 million in sales, quinoa did not have its own HS code for years. It fell under grains not elsewhere specified, NES. So it was very difficult, if not impossible, to tell what exports were going on with quinoa. And then the volumes got so big that the customs bureaus decided that they needed to separate it out. So, having the correct HS code is critical, understanding and knowing what to look for. Now, these websites here, we'll talk about them in detail coming up. These are excellent websites by the United Nations databases. We have links to them on the university website, and they're also in this PDF of this presentation. Those are sites that you must become familiar with. We use them. I use them almost every day. And I'm still finding new things and new tools and new ways to use them. They're quite extensive in providing data, and they're reasonably accurate, though we have found some conflicting data from time to time. There are country-specific databases. So this first one is the European Agricultural Statistics. The next one is a NationMaster, or nationmaster.com is a database on countries, has country profiles. So if I'm going to sell a product into a country, I'm going to look at their website, or at this website, try and get a feel for what it is they're producing, where they're producing it, what the competition may be, what their problems are. And this third site here is the US Department of Agriculture's website for data and statistics. These sites a lot of times tell me statistics on what is being produced, not what's being consumed, not what's being exported. So that allows us to understand what is being produced domestically, but I don't know where it's going. We had a difficult time doing some research for actually Turkmenistan company because we needed to find out what the consumption of a product was in Germany. Well, we could find out what they produced and we could find out what they imported, but without buying the seller-specific data, we couldn't tell what they were actually consuming. We knew what they were importing, we knew what they were producing, we didn't know what they were exporting, and we didn't know what was consumed. And Europe is difficult because a lot of product moves across the European community without statistics showing where it's final destination is. So, you have to look at Europe kind of like you look at the United States. We have 50 states here, and there's no record of what is consumed in, California versus Texas or Oregon versus Iowa. There are, if you go to the retail level and to the retail scan level, you can get that data. But as far as government statistics, it's limited. So how is international trade data gathered? Bill of lading. Now, as a consultant, your exporters and your traders should be familiar with bills of lading, and every shipment of every size, except for stuff that comes in the mail, has a bill of lading. And a bill of lading has all the information on the product. Doesn't have the price, but it has who is the seller, who is the buyer, and who is being notified. It has the HS code, or the product description. It has, as you can see here, if there's a fee for, in this case, cash against documents. So you have all of the information on this bill of lading. The bill of lading is the title for ownership to the goods. If you have a bill of lading and it's a current and active bill of lading, you can take that bill of lading into the steamship line or the trucker and say, this is my product. I have the bill of lading here. So keeping track of those bills of lading is critical. Actually, I had a situation where one of my employees lost a bill of lading, and it's a different story, but it can be a big hassle. But the key from our standpoint here on international trade is that the bill of lading becomes the record of what is being imported. Now, the HS code that goes on here, we're assuming it's accurate. And, we can do a HS code search. And as Othman said, you can also get the importing country to give a ruling on what the HS code should be. A lot of times it's based on how the product is packed or what material it's packed in. If it's in glass, it's one price. If it's in plastic, it's another price. If it's bulk, it's another price. Price being the duty rate is a different rate. And the HS code is different. We do importing of stainless steel containers for the food industry from Austria. Well, if they come in and they're under 200 liters, they're one duty rate and one HS code. If they're over 200 liters, it's another HS code. So understanding that and getting the ruling, and that's where you depend upon the buyers to help you with that as to what the HS code for their country is. But that HS code is what's going to drive your research. So on this, you can see it's got the exporter, the importer, the ports, the arrival port, the quantity, the weight, it's all there. So the bill of lading tells you what moves around in the port and what's coming in. It is the official record coming in. Now, Othman mentioned that the customs does inspections. In the United States, customs inspects only about 1% of the containers arriving. It's not a lot, but it's a chance. So one of my exporters from Tajikistan exported, and their container was one of the 1% that got inspected. Their label was inaccurate. Their HS code was inaccurate. So they got blackballed or redballed. Took some time to get it taken care of. So the inspection is minimal. Governments, depend on what the product is. And when the government inspects a container, they can do and take as much time as they want. Every once in a while, our stainless steel containers would be X-rayed. They would delay their shipment from the port. They'd go X-ray them to see if there was anything inside the containers. We, as the exporter, had to pay the demurrage for the container while it waited to be X-rayed, which really upset me because we did nothing to get it X-rayed, but we were being fined for it. So, best source of public data, trademap.org. Love it. It's a great way to find the data. So there are different ways to conduct your research. Review the export statistics, review import statistics. They should match. Export from country X to country Y should be just the opposite, as or mere data. So reviewing those statistics, using the internet. Visit trade shows in your target market, and we'll talk more about this later. And in today's world, you can visit the trade shows virtually. A lot of the trade shows have gone to virtual only. Others have gone to virtual and actual as well. But even when a trade show is not on, you can go to their website and look at the suppliers, look at the people that participated, and visit foreign markets. As they say, it used to be that was the only way we could get data. Now it is, one of many ways to gather the data. It's probably the most expensive. It can be accurate, but it's you also have to make some assumptions. So doing interviews, conducting interviews. They know what is being exported. Now, last time we talked about Microsoft Forms. It's a free application from Microsoft Office 365 that allows you to develop a questionnaire that will, you can do that for your customers and buyers. It's a nice form to use. When you're doing the interviews, banks know what's being bought and sold. Logistics companies, your freight forwarder, your trucker, the railroads, the airlines know what's being shipped out by air freight. Freight forwarders, government agencies, embassies and consulates. Your consulate inside every country will help promote exports from Turkmenistan. So reaching out to them, they can identify who buyers are and can help. There is myth and there is reality. Finding the difference between the two is the challenge. Looking at statistics is the way to do that. There are 6 websites listed here, all which have different databases behind them. We'll look at some of them. We're not going to look at all of them because we don't have time. And a lot of it is working through them and finding out what is of value to your customers. The data is there. So a lot of times it's just a matter of digging through and continuing to drill down on data. When you find something that's of interest, to drill down deeper. 6 more sites. Again, these are on our website, on the university's website. So TradeMap has data on about 95% of the world on their imports and exports. Access Map, or MAC Map, market access. It's great. Today I actually was looking up duty rates to find out if product was competitive from Egypt to Brazil, and it'll tell you what the duty rates are, and you can compare that with other countries and see if they have a competitive advantage or a free trade agreement with that country. And then the World Bank has a huge database as well. The World Bank's database tends to be more 30,000 foot, where MAP of market access is very specific, and TradeMap, you can identify quarterly what the sales are and a lot of historic information. So all good resources. I can't emphasize too little the importance of doing the research. So this is the landing site for trademap.org. It's actually, there's the International Trade Center. This is internationaltradecenter.org. But from here, you can go to trademap.org. I'll do a little video here.
For small and medium-sized enterprises in developing countries, getting information about potential new export markets can be expensive and time-consuming. Before investing resources on market research, export managers need to know which market offers the best export opportunities for their products, the latest demand trends for their products in the global market,
Sorry about that.
and related market entry barriers. ITC offers a set of free online databases and analytical tools that can take some of the guesswork out of choosing export markets. ITC market analysis tools enable you to research trade opportunities for over 5,300 products in around 200 countries and territories. You can compare the size, growth, and market competition, and even get an idea on prices and trends. Once you've chosen a market, investigating market regulations and requirements also becomes easier with ITC tools. You can self-assess voluntary sustainability standards for your business. With your market identified and researched, ITC tools help you move into action with contact details and company information on over 550,000 importers, distributors, producers, and suppliers in over 60 countries. To help you understand and use ITC tools and other trade information most effectively, ITC has free e-learning content and can also run webinars or deliver face-to-face training workshops on request. The feedback from users indicated that using ITC tools has helped them export by around $100 million per year. These additional exports have had substantial impact, contributing to job creation, poverty reduction, and sustainable development around the world. ITC tools and capacity building programs are delivered with the collaboration and support of donors to ITC Trust Fund, Aid for Trade Donors, and other international organizations. Start using ITC tools today. Register for your free password and learn more about how ITC helps deliver trade impact for good.
So as I said earlier, that is my go-to for trade data. It's the starting point. They do have the webinars to learn how better to use them. And I think they also have many of those webinars in Russian. So there's options for you to listen in Russian. So great tools. You have to set up an account. For you, the accounts are free. For me, I have to pay for them because I'm in a developed country, but great tools. And they are working off of, so ITC International Trade Center is part of the United Nations. They are what they call the Trade for Aid, or Alliance for Action is one of their new terms, on how to develop countries and improve economies, improve livelihoods through trade, which is really in one of the better efforts in trade or in economic development, is to do it through increasing trade. You can see here they've got, this is highlighted, this is not a live site here for us, but if you were to click on that, you can learn more about the HS code system and identify which HS codes your clients would use. So within the access map, trade access map, again, there are general and most favored nation and preferential tariff rates. As an exporter, you don't have to worry about what the customer is paying on taxes and on import prices, other than making sure that your price is competitive. So for example, we were looking today, as I say, looking at moving textiles from Egypt to Brazil. There's a 35% duty from Egypt to Brazil, or I'm sorry, Morocco to Brazil. And the next step is to find out, for example, what is the duty rate from another country. If from China, there's no duty, then Morocco's at a 35% disadvantage over China. Not considering the labor costs, transportation costs, material costs, but strictly on a tax basis. So using this trade access map and the tools will help you identify, can you be competitive into a market? Some countries and some markets will utilize tariffs and taxes and quotas to limit product that can come in. and to protect a domestic industry. So if that's the case, and that may be the case in Brazil, is they do have a domestic textile industry, for example. So they're going to tax imports to make and to allow their own producers to be competitive. So talks about trade remedies and anti-dumping, rules and certificate of origin. It's interesting, years ago we did a study, and it had product that was showing up through the International Trade Center as being exported by United Arab Emirates, and it was a product that they didn't and couldn't produce. So there was some issues going on with the certificates of origin. There are products, for example, that will ship from Egypt to Malaysia, but they'll stop in Singapore and get a Singapore certificate of origin because Malaysia cannot buy that product from Egypt. Everybody in the trade knows it's happening, but the statistics are not going to show that. Statistics are going to show that the shipment went from Singapore to Malaysia. Singapore doesn't produce, that's grapes. Singapore doesn't produce grapes, but the statistics show that they do. So certificates of origin and rules of certificates of origin, and again, understanding the trade. Everybody in the trade knows that happens. The governments just turn a blind eye to that, but it does happen. So these are examples of some of the data that you can get on ITC. Now, one of the things that they mentioned is market price information. And I don't like it. The price information is not necessarily accurate. It's what's being claimed on the bill of lading, but that doesn't always reflect the reality. It may be undervalued. For example, if somebody's paying part of the amount via letter of credit, or they're paying 50% upfront, or they're paying 50% 60 days later, the bill of lading may not reflect that. It's a way to lower taxes. As you look here, this was on onions, dried onions. It shows the different prices for different origins. It kind of gives you an idea of what the price range is, but I do not recommend that you utilize this as a means to set your price, particularly on a product like dried onions. The market will set the price. Supply and demand will set the price. You can look here and see how the trends are, and you can look and see which origins are able to sell at a higher price, but do not count on it as the end-all, tell-all for price indications. Here's an example. This is pulling up the data and putting it into a chart. Within international ITC and the trade map and stuff, you can export stuff to a Word document, to an Excel, to a graph, to a chart. All things that are very helpful in dealing with your clients, to tell them and to show them how these actually appear and how they you know, a lot of times people do much better with a visual picture than they do with the wording. So I'll play a little video for you here. Once you've signed on to the International Trade Center's trademap.org, you can do research into, as they say here, 5,300 products based on HS codes in 220 different countries. In this location here, you can change your account and how you manage the account. What we're going to do today in our first search is we're going to do exports. Because we're working with our first search, we want to use a broad HS category, so we're going to go 07. 07 is edible vegetables. You can see here it gets more specific, going out to 6 HS categories, but for our first search, we want to get the general trends. We start with 07. In this, you can choose a country or a region. In this case, we're going to choose a country, because we're interested in exports from Turkmenistan. We plug in Turkmenistan, we hit trade indicators. What that does is pull up a table which gives us information on where Turkmenistan is historically exporting product. You can see here, not surprisingly, the Russian Federation Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Turkey are the main truck players, with Russian Federation being the number one. You can click on this plus in the left-hand side, which allows you to drill down on that HS code. So we're going from 07, you can see here now 07, 02, 07, 07. It'll break down what the product is. Not surprisingly, the product in this case is fresh tomatoes or chilled tomatoes. And keeping going on the same process here. In this data, we can also look at it in a graphic format. We have a number of different graph options that allow us to visualize the trade. You see here, kind of a visualization in the case, again, the Russian Federation is the largest. You can do it showing what share of their exports. There's a number of different options that'll give you a different perspective on what the opportunities are. And this one bubble graph of Turkmenistan export growth and partner imports gives you an idea of what the potential to increase your exports are for the product. You can also do it on a map, which will map the trade. In this case, again, it's going to be fairly centric to the Russian Federation. And in some cases, you can click on countries, and we'll see that played out a little bit later on. That'll allow you to identify companies that are importing. That provides a basic list of potential or target customers that you will want to pursue because they are involved in the trading of that particular HS code. Remember from earlier in their video, they said they had 55,000 companies, and they break those down by activity. So if they're importing a specific HS code, you can identify all of the importers of a specific product in a specific market through the database that's here. That is, and for some reason, my option has been turned off on that, and I wasn't able to pull up the reports there, but you will be able to pull them up for sure because of where you're at. And you can utilize those companies. There is data on their website and how to get in touch with them. And that then becomes your target customer base. If you can say, okay, I know that Turkey, for example, is a buyer. We can see that they're a lavender color here. I know they're buying product. How do we approach them? You look at the company list, you find the companies that are in Turkey, and all of a sudden you have targeted customers. So here's the data that we were just talking about. You can see the volumes, trade balance. So in this one, we're talking 08. 08 is fruits and nuts. And so basically in food, the two primary codes are 07 and 08. And then the third one is 2020, which is processed foods. Now you can get into grains and other products that have different codes, but those three, 07, 08, and 20, are your primary products for agriculture, for food exports. Again, they go down 6 digits, or in this case 4, and you can drill deeper. This data shows you trade balances, their global trade balance. So in this case, for example, 08, they're importing a lot from Turkey and a lot from Uzbekistan. And for Russia, they actually have a trade surplus. You can see what percentage of the market share the countries are. So if I'm looking for, if I'm exporting a product that falls into this category, obviously Russia is the number one. It's not to say that down here, for example, Azerbaijan or even Canada. Now the question would be, why is Canada showing up as 10%? They're not geographically close. So what is the product? If I were taking a longer time, I could drill down on this or through this plus here and find out what the product is and determine, is that something I should go after? And as I said earlier, not always going after the biggest market. Russian Federation is going to be fairly competitive. So I'm not necessarily going to want to go after that. They, however, are more familiar with your HACCP and standards, sanitation terms and stuff, and more willing to accept product. They speak the same language, so there's the benefits there. Some of this where there's 140 tons of export to Turkey. That could be a return shipment or $140,000. So it could be, it's an anomaly. Maybe you are exporting some, or maybe it's product that came into the country, didn't meet the specifications, and was shipped back. You can drill down to look at some of these other countries where there's opportunities. Looking across, you get different flows. Now, as I said, the data is not perfect. I was in Uzbekistan and I found Peruvian grapes in the grocery store. Uzbekistan statistically imports no grapes from Peru, but they were there. So either somebody was using a different HS code or they were being transshipped. You can see here that Russia imports a little bit, $24,000, which is probably one container. Kazakhstan imports a little bit, $6,000. So it is possible that they were importing product through Russia, came in on a truck out of Moscow, somebody bought a truck and it maybe had some grapes on it. So the information is not perfect, but it's close. So even though in this case the grapes were there, they didn't statistically show up. So part of the reasons why that could happen is a transshipment where it's shipped from one country to another. So maybe it was shipped into Holland and then from Holland it shipped out. So the import would actually show that it's not from Peru, but from Holland. Or Germany or other places, Latvia, Lithuania, someplace else that it was shipping to and then transshipping. Could have come in a mixed load. It could have even been smuggled in. The data could be inaccurate. They could be using the wrong HS code. Or it's a multinational retailer, Carrefour or Aldi or somebody that is supplying their own store, and they're shipping a truckload of grapes and lettuce and celery and eggplant and everything else, aubergine, into the market. So it may not be, it may be the retailer bringing the product in. So, here's another example, and this is where data is important. I was hired in Kazakhstan to help the Kazakhstan Export Agency train them, similar training to this. We did a week-long session of training. That was back when we were able to travel there, and went there and they said, well, let's use horse meat as an example because we export a lot of horse meat. And we did the research, and Kazakhstan is actually a net importer of horse meat. They're importing about $5 million of, in addition to, as a surplus to their exports. So they're exporting product, but at the end of the day, they're importing about $5 million more than they export. This was a big shock to the government. They didn't realize that. They thought they were an exporter. And we showed them, no, you're importing a lot from Argentina, a lot from Mongolia, and they're probably in actuality importing a lot more than this from Mongolia because they have a very porous border between them and Mongolia. Obviously the product coming in from Argentina is very clear. It was in a full container load. Same thing with Uruguay, Mexico. Iceland is interesting. None of us understood why Iceland was exporting horses or horse meat, but it happens. So the country thought they were an importer. When they got into the statistics, they found out, wait, or thought they were an exporter. They got into statistics and found out, wait, we're an importer. They're importing more than they export. Now, see, if you look here at the unit price, there's, all of a sudden Mexico is half the price of Bulgaria. That's probably not an accurate number. Or, again, like with horse meat, it's a different cut of product. Maybe the product coming in from Mexico is a lower grade, maybe it's tail meat or skull meat or whatever, where the product coming in from Argentina is the flank or fillet. So it doesn't tell you that. The data doesn't tell you the quality of the product. So that's why these numbers don't necessarily make sense. Now, they can give you a relative impact of the range, but it doesn't tell you what the actual quality is. The quality could be very different. So, and over here on the far right is the tariffs. And you can see the tariffs are 11.3 in most cases, but here in Bulgaria, it's 15%, and down here in Iceland, it's 15%. So did that change the price that they're able to sell the product at? No, because at the end of the day, the price delivered has to take that into consideration. Now, we did a similar thing. ITC hired me to do a research on increasing Sierra Leone's exports of palm oil. Same type of situation. We came back and said, why did you hire me to look at exports when in fact they're importing about $10 million more than they export? I'm still in an argument with the ITC. They're like, that can't be accurate. And I laughed and said, but the numbers are coming from your site, from your database. So the numbers are not always accurate, but they do give you a place to start. You do learn what trends and patterns are. And this, even though we were looking for one thing and found something different, we now know that Malaysia and Indonesia are major importers, and Senegal should be their target market, not the United States, which is what they were looking at. They wanted me to write a report saying how great the US market was. US is a huge importer of palm oil, but it's all come from Indonesia and Malaysia. And the fact that Sierra Leone is running a deficit tells me that they can't be competitive with them on price. We haven't done a price study. We haven't done study in country, and we haven't been able to compare the qualities. But from the statistics, it looks unlikely that they're going to have a competitive advantage coming into this market. This is another database that allows you, this is the, I just went blank on whose database is. Oh, Comtrade. This is Comtrade's database, comtradebot.com. And Comtrade is, again, part of the United Nations. And a lot of times the data from International Trade Center is from Comtrade. Comtrade is the bigger, unmassaged and unmanipulated data that you can download, bulk data. You can download in CVS or CSV format and do your own analysis. I plugged in here, Turkmenistan and tomatoes. Yeah, here we go, fresh tomatoes, 0702, and found out that they're not really exporting because it's over here on trade flows. They're importing from Azerbaijan and Kyrgyzstan. These are the relative values. So obviously Azerbaijan is not a huge supplier, though they are a supplier. So this is the type of data that you can get from Comtrade. Another example on Comtrade. We're going to work with classification. We're going to work all years. Here we're looking at competition. So we want to find out who is shipping product, in this case, vegetables and tomatoes. So I'm going to interrupt the video here real quickly, but we're looking at competition. So we know we want to find out, is Italy is a competitor on fresh tomatoes. So where are they shipping to? And if I know where they're shipping, I know where I should be able to ship and be competitive. So that's what we're doing here, is you're drilling down and, excuse me, you're drilling down and looking at what the competition is shipping into United Arab Emirates. Who's shipping vegetables and tomatoes into United Arab Emirates? So we plugged in Italy here. I've already done that. I will also plug in Egypt. So we choose Egypt and import. So I want to know the imports in United Arab Emirates. So I hit get the data. Now, one thing to notice while we're looking for this, you can download it into a CSV, and that allows you to separate and sort the data yourself and apply it and create graphs and charts as you so desire to fit your needs to work with the companies you're working with. Because they're working with a large database, it does take some time. You can see here, this goes back from 1994 to 2014. Actually, we've got more data here. So be sure to hit next. You can see it's got Italy and Egypt combined here in different spots. So you can look and see what the relative shipments from Italy are very small compared to those from Egypt. You go to next, it brings you up to 2020. And there's Egypt, there's Italy. You can see the volumes. Now, this doesn't tell you who the buyers are or what type of business they are, but it does give you the volume, so you can get a feel for the competition. And again, we can look and say, okay, we know now that Egypt is a much bigger competitor in most years. Now, look here, we've got Italy in 2017 is quite a bit more. 2020, they're at $400,000, and Egypt is at $26,000. So at this point in time, Egypt's not the competitor they were in the earlier years. You need to figure out what the causes that are. We know Italy is a competitor, so then we can take a look at how Italy shakes out and what other countries they're selling to and at what time frames. So one of the key points here is that it has shifted. And what is the cause of that shift? Is it a political shift? The Arab Spring changed a lot of things there, but that wasn't in 2019, so that wasn't it. Was it that the Egyptian crop was a failure? Don't know, would have to check into that. Was it that the Italians had a surplus because they had a bumper crop? Or was it because one of their key markets that they normally sell to had another source? So this is a type of thing that you can, doing this research will actually a lot of times create more questions to try and figure out why things changed. Why in this one year was Egypt only selling $1,000 of tomatoes when in other years they were selling $300,000 and $400,000? What changed that? Now, from your standpoint as the exporter and as the consultant working with the exporter, you can then say, okay, we know Italy's selling into United Arab Emirates. We should be able to sell there. Where else is Italy selling? And try and target their markets, try and find out. Or is Egypt now, is there a reason why they stopped exporting? Do they have demand to import the product? All questions that this type of data will stimulate the questions for. Another example on Comtrade, we're going to work with, same video. So what do I do if there's little historic data? What do I search on? The earlier screen, you'll remember that we clicked on this plus to see what the HS code was that was being exported from Turkmenistan to the Russian Federation. If we click on the underlined or the linked countries, we're able to see who else is exporting product to them at that time. In this case, let's drill down a little deeper. Let's go to tomatoes. So we know that that's the main product that's being exported. We click on Russian Federation here, and that will show you what other countries are exporting tomatoes to the Russian Federation. In this case, Azerbaijan, Turkey, Morocco, etc. If we click on Azerbaijan, that will show us the other countries that they're exporting tomatoes to. So we can assume that if they're competitive going into Russia, and they're also shipping to these other countries, then you will also be able to compete in these other countries. That would mean that your time frame would match up and other factors would match up. It would allow you to consider them as a viable market. So finding out what the competition is doing is a great way to determine what you should be doing. Again, why reinvent the wheel? Now, ITC, as I said earlier, includes the company names, but it doesn't contain specific data on what they're importing, when, or the quantities. We'll get to that in a second. So here, for example, we're listing all the products of companies in Egypt that are importing onions. And here they are. And this is a type of data. It tells you how many categories they're importing. So if they've got 56 categories here, for example, he's importing all kinds of products. Very big company, 500 to 1,000 people. These others may be a little smaller. They're in 8 categories, so it's more specialized. So chances are they're more in line with what you've got. Smaller number of employees. Look down here, 0 to 9, small companies, 6 categories. So this data is available. You click on here or here over on the far right, you will pull up their website. If I'm an exporter of onions, for example, I will spend my time and look at each one of these companies to try and identify who we should be selling to. Now, again, you can take a look at the dollar units and the value, and you can see here it varies significantly. Here's one down here, Poland, 2,140 versus the Netherlands at 507. So we don't know what the quality is. We don't know what the relationship is. So this number, like I say, I don't use that very frequently to judge the actual trade. But the quantity, yes. The market share, definitely. So in this case, we were looking at onions on export. 57 or 55% of Egypt's onions are going to Saudi Arabia. Now, interestingly, Saudi Arabia recently banned product coming in out of Lebanon because of political issues. How did that impact the exports from Egypt? This data is this 2018. There is 2020 data available, not 2021, but 2020 data is available. So it's history, it's past information, but it gives you a feel. So now we know what the global trends are, who's buying what countries, what competition. Now you try and figure out what companies are involved. We saw the companies listed on Trade Map and the example of the companies. This website, Compass, Kompas, has companies in 66 countries. So if your target market is one of these countries and you click on this, and I'll show you in a demo in a moment, you can then start to identify companies that are involved in the trade. So Compass International, there are different levels of service, and we'll talk about that briefly as to how much information you get and what's available. Compass, Kompass.com, is a good global database for B2B business. In this case, I can either search down here under food and agriculture or other sectors if I desire, or I can plug in a specific product. In this case, I'm going to plug in tomatoes. And it pulls up 3,926 companies that are involved in tomatoes. If you look here, you can see how many per country. So we can choose the country, or we can choose people that are importing. If I choose importing, it brings up 630 companies. So if I'm a tomato exporter, this is a list that I can start with. And again, I can come down and choose specific countries that I want to look at. I want to look at who is importing tomatoes in Poland. It narrows it down. There's 72 countries, companies that are importing tomatoes into Poland. That would be a specific target base that I'd want to pursue. I can come down and click on the company's website. It takes me to their information inside a Compass. I can also search, or I can go to a database and find their website and look at them specifically. In this case, it's down here. Click here, opens a new tab for me, and uploads their database, their website. Yeah. Compass. So we've started out, we've identified where, now we can identify who specifically within countries. Now, the challenge for companies is you've got a huge databases. I think there was 360 companies who were importing tomatoes, for example. How do you contact them? And we'll talk more about that in the next session, the next session is how do you contact them? And with tools that are out there like MailChimp.com, we can easily contact thousands of companies at a time. with the same information and database and stay in touch with our data, stay in touch with them. I have in my contact list, and I regularly send out emails to about 16,000 companies promoting product. If I'm more focused and I'm just looking at tomatoes, for example, I will start providing those companies with updates on the tomato crop and the harvest and the weather conditions so that they begin to appreciate our knowledge in the product and will start to consider us as a supplier. So we've now gone to where we have companies inside of. Now, one thing to be consider is the Netherlands, the Netherlands factor. If you look at the trade data, the Netherlands are a huge importer of fresh produce. You know, their per capita consumption, if they didn't re-export it, would be huge. So the Netherlands has a lot of product coming in, but it's all being re-exported and shipped out. A couple of years ago, when I was working with Uzbekistan, we had identified that Belarus imports all of a sudden boomed, and they were importing a lot of product from everywhere. Well, that's because the world put the sanctions on Russia and product was finding its way in through Belarus. If you looked at the statistics, you go, well, let's go to Belarus and try and build our business, when in actuality, it was just a trans point to ship product into Russia. So the Netherlands is a great example. They're a big port of entry, and product that enters there ends up across Europe, across Central Asia. They're also an interesting fact because they import and export. So there will be times when they're importing onions and exporting onions. They'll be importing tomatoes and exporting tomatoes. Following their harvest is a great way to anticipate what the market's going to do. And there are hundreds of companies very centrally located that you can visit and talk to about what your opportunities are. Other sources of data, we're going to work through those. The FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, you can see here they've got 332,000 maps. They have 67 data sets. This is more from a production standpoint in how much acreage is planted of the single product, how many hectares of apricots are planted in what country. And you can look here, they've got producer price indications, they've got air and climate can change, they got burning crop data, they've got stocks, inventories, balances, primary commodities. So if I'm doing peas, beans, lentils, wheat, corn, soybeans, cotton, this is a great source of statistical data on what is being produced in different countries. From a practical standpoint, as an exporter, I haven't necessarily found that of value because we're not in the basic agricultural section trying to figure out, should I plant corn or cotton? We're trying to, again, as I say, trying to find something different with the products and crops that we do plant. So to me, that it's a great source of data and it's fascinating, but from a practical standpoint, there's not a lot of actionable data that can come from here. Comtrade, this is a lot of the data that's used for the ITC is generated through Comtrade. So there's monthly data starting in 2010, annual data from 1962. There are crop reports on here, country profiles, commodity profiles. Again, if I'm an exporter and I have a crop, that crop becomes my hobby and my desire to learn. In Charm Dance, we talk about M for markets and understanding the markets. This is where you'll get information on what's happening in those markets. So Comtrade, very similar to what we've already done to do their research. If you're US focused and have an opportunity to sell product to the US, the USDA has a site. It has information on prices. There are within here charts and maps. They have prices at the import terminals. So I can look and see what the price of tomatoes is in Philadelphia today, or cherries. The cherries are a good one because they do travel by air freight a lot. So if there's a shortage of cherries in Philadelphia and I'm producing, I can ship right away. So staying in touch with that if you have a product for the US market. And this is primarily for commodities and not for processed foods as much. You're not going to find a report on here for a sauce or a seasoning or a spice. USDA has GAINS, which is Global Agricultural Information Network. And it's great. It's actually built to help US promote their exports. But they'll take a market, for example, Afghanistan, and they'll do a report on the Afghanistan market for apples or pomegranates, which is really, it's intended for the US exporter to say, okay, now I understand the Afghanistan market, but that market doesn't change if you're shipping from Turkmenistan or Egypt or Morocco to Afghanistan versus the United States. So this GAIN market, most export promotion people don't talk about it because it's really built to help US exporters from the Foreign Agricultural Service. But the reports that they have available are great to help you understand other markets. For example, Organic Market EU. That's a report. This is an older screenshot. That's a report that was done in February of 2019. They probably have updated it since, but I can go on there and tell you what the market is based on the US perspective, but that perspective doesn't change. So there's a lot of reports there that will help you, even though it's not talking about how you can export, it's talking about how Americans can export, but the markets, the distribution system, the retailers, the importers, distributors, none of that information changes. So it's a great source for information. Here's an example. Food and Agriculture Regulation Standards. EU 28 talks about the standards and the regulations for the European market. And you can see here, public distribution. It's available for free. The European Union has their Agriculture and Rural Development website, has statistics on their imports, statistics on trade, their requirements, the agricultural statistics, trade statistics, fact sheets. It's all here to dive down into. You can spend. I could have spent hours on this just working on this for this presentation. The FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, again, primarily focused on commodities, not on value-added product, but it does have trade and market statistics. It does have fisheries and aquaculture if that's of interest. The FAO statistical website is linked here, so you can go into the yearbook and see how much product is being produced in which countries. So the International Trade Center talks about what's going across borders. This talks about what's produced inside the country. So when we were trying to figure out how much dried watermelon was consumed in Germany, this was a site we could look at and determine, is Germany producing watermelon? If so, can we find anybody that's producing a dried watermelon? And again, we talk here, the HS codes are critical to make sure you have and are researching the right product. Nation Master, we talked about that briefly earlier. It's the view of the country to understand the economics and the politics within that country, the economic trends. That we'll talk about retailers and retail distribution and help you understand the market. This is a late addition to the course because in America, we don't utilize Alibaba as much as the rest of the world. But Alibaba does allow us to do a review and determine what is being offered, particularly out of China, but they're trying to globalize and look at sourcing from everywhere. But I can look on here. This was a search that we did for tried watermelon, and we can see a price range. We can see, how it's packed. They're packing 75 grams. They will do your label, OEM. They will do your brand. So it'll give you, and there's 10 pieces in a package. It'll give you an idea of how product is packaged, what is available, like I say, particularly out of China, but other markets as well. Spending your time and researching it. Using that as a database. We also use, and we have a whole other course on Amazon and how Amazon works. And this is very similar in being able to identify what's out there. If they're all packaging in 75 grams, is there logic in me going with 100 grams or in 50 grams? That's something you'd have to determine. If 50 grams is too small, or maybe it's a great package to send in school lunch, in your school, send to school in your son or daughter's lunch bucket. Maybe it's a better size for that. So as we talked about, everything's driven off of the bill of lading. So the data that's on that is what's going to drive it. Now, there are a lot of bill of lading consolidators, and a consolidator takes this bill of lading and allows consumers or their subscribers to search it. And we'll see an example of how that works. But these companies are all businesses. They sell the data. They take the public data and put it in a format that allows us to analyze it. And there's a number of different companies. Some of them are US based, some of them are China based, some of them are European based. So, choose the company that works best for you. I've used this one up top here, Panjiva. We'll take a look at that. This Discardis is a very big one, but it's expensive. Import Genius is good, and again, not necessarily cheap. They may have different prices for Turkmenistan than they do for somebody sitting in Seattle. So worth an exploration. So this is kind of a chart of the different data sources that are out there. There's transactions, and these are some of the databases that are there. Peers is when I mentioned earlier that we used to get a newspaper. Peers was the original one that came out with a big newspaper that had the data in it. It's now digital and online. There's internal country data. And then there's the statistics, like I say, the Comtrade, etc. This Manifest DB, DB meaning database, that's Manifest database. It covers multiple countries, as you see here. And it takes the bill of lading data and compiles it. So you can search for who, and it gets very specific. It can tell you, it'll have who the exporter is and who the importer is and how much product was on there and how it was packed. Data that's, if you've got a product that you're trying to market, buying this data is definitely worth the expenses. Here's what they would charge me, $500 for 3 countries, 3 years historical data, one-time payment, no monthly fees. And data comes in Excel spreadsheets, which means I have to try and manipulate it. I can go with 5 countries, 10 countries, or 20 countries. So it allows you to choose after you've identified from the trademap.com or .org, you've identified who the countries are. So maybe I only need 3 countries because I'm going to focus on that. So $500 to get the bill of lading data on imports for 3 countries or for 3 years historical data is not a big payment. Definitely worth it if you're trying to build your business. So as I say, largest bill of lading source. Not all of the companies that we talk about here have multiple countries. A lot of them are focused on the US or focused on China or India. This particular one, ManifestDB, has global data. Make sure it has the countries that you're looking at. You can see it covers updated data on a daily basis, reaching over 50 million moves around the world. TEU meaning 20-foot equivalent unit. So that's the amount of data that you would have to go through if you were trying to calculate it yourself. This is another one. This is very specific on the European Union trade statistics. You can see here now they also have available Asia, Africa, CIS, Europe, North America, and South America. So they started out in Europe. Now they've got all these other databases. They go to the governments and buy the databases. They have programs written up that manipulate that databases that allows laymen, the average person, to do the search. You don't have to be a computer programmer to work with it, or a data analyst. And on this, talks about their fees. You have to go to the next stage to determine if it's going to work for you. Here's their database and their tools. This is an example. You can see this is 2018, sent by C. There's the importer's name. So you'll have to take that importer's name and do a Google search or a Zoom search or a Microsoft search to find out who they are and try and track them down. In some cases, you'll have their phone number on the bill of lading data. It has what the product is, very specific, how it's packaged, and PP, meaning polypropylene, the value. Now this value is, again, it may or may not be accurate. You can see the terms, CIF, and TTR payment terms. So it's telling you what the payment terms were prior to this telegraphic transfer. They paid by wire. So all that information's here. It's amazing. People say, well, how do you know who's exporting what? It's there. You just have to buy it and be able to analyze it. Panjiva is one that I've used extensively, particularly in looking at the US market. They were acquired by S&P Global. Their rates have gone very high because they have gone bigger, but they do provide some good information. You can see here, they're limited in their countries: United States, Brazil, Central America, India, Philippines, Sri Lanka. So if I'm looking at what's going into India, they're a good source. But if I'm looking what's going into Dubai, United Arab Emirates, they don't have it. So you need to make sure that the countries that you've identified and targeted are included.
What fuels supply chain decisions? Commonly shared knowledge, dated information, or billions of data points extracted from millions of companies to give you real-time answers and insights? The unrivaled data analytics and research of the intuitive Panjiva platform lifts the fog of global trade. Panjiva Supply Chain Intelligence from S&P Global Market Intelligence. With Panjiva at the ready, you're better equipped to understand your customers' trading partners and pinpoint the greatest risks to your supply chain. Wondering if your supplier is over or under capacity, or how you can efficiently grow your customer base? Panjiva supplies those answers and many more in seconds. To immediately target the best leads, you can prospect by geographic territory or trade lane, then filter by additional criteria. You can quickly call up summary reports of detailed shipment volume totals and relevant market share percentages to weed out poor matches at a glance. When you're ready to take the next step, direct contact information by employee title is just one search away. Your inquiry gets into the right inbox the first time. More than improving your own supply chain intelligence, the Panjiva platform arms you with deep competitive insights With our advanced supply chain mapping, you'll gain a more accurate picture of who your competitors are working with and what they're importing. You'll also have the advantage of creating specific company alerts and assessing shipment level data. Growth opportunities are out there. The Panjiva platform will help you seize them while streamlining your entire lead generation workflow. Panjiva, from S&P Global Market Intelligence, the world supply chain at your fingertips.
So one of the things that's interesting on that is, and she touched upon it, was the ability to set up a notice of what to track an importer or your competitor. So for our business, we import stainless steel containers from Austria. There are 2 or 3 major competitors. I have it set up so that every time they import, I get an email that tells me they've imported. In the email, I then can go drill down and figure out who they bought it from and where they shipped it and who they sold it to. So it's like a transparent database that allows me to see what my competition is doing. There's no reason for me not to utilize something like this to track what they're doing. Now, by the time that the data comes through and says that they imported a container and they sold it to company A, it's too late for me to sell to company A because they've already done it. But I know who they're selling to and what type of product they're selling. And then I can look for other companies that are similar to company A and try and establish a relationship with them. Actually, I'm not going to play this through. It is posted on our International Digital University website. This doesn't have any verbiage to it, and I didn't voice over it. It just has the music, but it gives you a visual of what they can do. It's fairly long, it's 7 minutes, but it does, like I say, educate you as to what they can do. Now, they're one example of many. Find the one that fits best for you and fits your budget, but more importantly, fits the target market that you're looking at. So if I'm looking at India, I'm probably not going to choose one that focuses on Brazil, for example, or the United States. Again, this data is more accurate than what you'll find with the International Trade Center because you can drill down on individual bills of lading. As they said there, one of the things that you can do is find out who is importing and the contact information for that importer, because the contact information is on the bill of lading as the notify party. So you can find out who's importing. Now, they're already buying from somebody else. That's one thing that we have to remember, is that every product that you sell, your supplier is not new to that business. He's already buying from somebody. Unless you have the yellow kiwi or the red quinoa, he's already buying from somebody else. So you have to wait for somebody else to make a mistake, to raise their price, to be late in the shipment, to have a drought or a blight that changes their situation. So one of the most discouraging things is that people say, well, I can't get any export business. I offered them and they never responded. Well, that's because they got offers from 15 other companies. So you need to continue to offer to them. As I say, I send out market updates. Here's the crop situation. And I send it out to thousands of people at a time with the push of a button. And they get that information. And ultimately, when their supplier makes a mistake, they're going to come back to us. So as a consultant, I can give my clients all this information and I can target where they need to go. But if they don't follow up, they don't do the E and charm dance for execution, if they're not consistently going to their customers or their targeted customers and trying to win their business, they're not going to win it overnight. It's going to take time. Now, I'm going to sign off here. Before I sign off, we'll do some questions if anybody has questions for me. But Ashwin is going to finish tonight's session because last time I understand there was some difficulty with his internet. We believe we've corrected that. There's only 15 slides remaining, so it should not be a problem. I will not be giving the course tomorrow. I will be traveling, so Ashwin will be giving it, so we want to make sure that works. So before I turn it over to Ashwin, is there any questions that I can answer on any of the materials that we've had so far? Now, this is really discouraging because on this side, I can't tell if anybody's even listening.
Hi, Jim. I'm listening to you. I've got one question I would like to ask. In what degree it's important to make a primary market research? Is it essential in every case?
You can shortcut it, but I don't recommend it because that's where mistakes are made. We've got, for example, and I've got personal examples where we thought a market was there based on limited research, and we go and spend time at a trade show or money trying to find the customer and sending samples, only to find out that it's the wrong market. Our size of the product was wrong, or the maturity of the crop was wrong, or the color of the packaging was wrong. And all that stuff we can learn about through the initial research. So instead of me trying to send a package to Japan, for example, that is the wrong color label, and I did that. I sent we like a black label on a canned peach, for example, because the peach really pops and stands out. So we sent that to Japan, and my Japanese customers came back and said nobody would ever buy the product. We said, why? He said, well, black is the color of death. So you don't want to open a can that's black because you're going to get sick and die. So I would have been able to tell that if I had done my market research. And this was back before the internet. So I wasn't able to go online to do the research. I could only go there to their stores. And that was a situation. We went to the store and there were no black labels. We said, hey, this would be great. We'd be the only one with a black label. So we went, sent the samples, and it was the wrong product. So the market research that can be done now, I would have drilled into the retailer's database. I would have reached out to my buyers, and I would have been able to tell before we went to that mistake. Same thing with trade shows. We supported under a USAID contract the Georgian delegation to bring their wines to the Fancy Food Show in New York City. And they were very popular because they were giving away free wine, but that's not the right show for that product. And I knew that, and I told USAID that, but they wanted to go to the show because it was a very popular show and very visible, but it was the wrong show. And again, doing the primary research would have told them that there are no wine buyers at that show. So, and we'll talk about trade shows and how to do the research to choose the right show, but that's an example of how doing the initial research helps. Now, that being said, there are times when you can use the information that you have to make an educated decision on what to do. There was a product in Peru called Sacha Inchi, which is a crop from the Amazon, grown in the jungle, and it was very high in omega oils. Now, we did not take the time to do the market research because we knew that omega-3 oils were very popular, so we moved very quickly. And we got the product into the Japanese market. Now, it wasn't sustainable because it turned out that the omega-3 oil, when they did the scientific analysis, the chain of omega-3 was too short. So it wasn't providing the health benefits that we thought it would. But if we'd done more research on the quality of the product, we would have known that before the Japanese, it was a big Japanese customer, and he did a big launch and was very aggressive to start out with until the consumers learned that it didn't accomplish what they thought it would. If we'd done the market research, we would have known that. If we took the time to do the market research and it turned out that the omega-3 was good and somebody else beat us to market, we would have missed the opportunity. So you have to kind of judge from your own experience and your information as to, does it make sense? Asparagus is another good example. Is we tell a lot of countries that they should produce asparagus, and projects and governments say, well, bring us a buyer first. And I say, I don't need to bring you a buyer. Once we have the product, I know I can sell it because we've got the experience in it. So you have to kind of judge that going in. But I've never found that having the information has been to my detriment. It's always to my advantage. The biggest challenge there is timing, to be able to act quickly on the information and not becoming, we say, paralyzed by the details, or paralysis by analysis is the English term, or I'm spending too much time analyzing this and I'm afraid to move forward. At some point in time, you have to make the educated decision to move forward. And you can never live in the perfect world that says that this is going to be a perfect success. You have to base it on gut feeling. That's why I say there's a science in the art. The art is deciding when to pull the trigger and when to stop doing the research and start doing the sales. But doing the research has never hurt. And what can happen is do the research parallel to launching the product and getting things established. And there's no better market research than a buyer saying they're interested. If a buyer says your price is good, your quality is good, then you don't need to do the research. You already got a buyer that's willing to commit.
Okay, thanks, Jim. One more question. Is mail marketing is effective nowadays?
Mail marketing or email?
Email marketing, sorry.
Yes and no. So we have, like I say, we have another business that sells stainless steel containers from Europe, and we send out probably once every 3 to 5 days an email to a targeted market out of our database. We probably have 6,000 companies in our database, and we'll target it to a segment within that. And it's called MailChimp, and MailChimp will show us who opened the email and who went to our website. So from that database, we may send out, 1,000 emails. We may only get 50 people that go to our website, but then I know who they are. And when I know who they are, I can pick up the phone and call them. Now, the problem is if it's a big company like Kraft or Del Monte, I know that somebody at Kraft opened it, but I don't always know who. But the database, the ability to track your emails, it helps you identify. Now, if I just send it directly from my computer and don't have any real tracking on it, then I don't know if they got it, if they opened it, if they're interested. But if I send it out through one of the services and they track who opens it, who clicks on what page. So if my website has 50 different container designs, I can tell which one is the one with the biggest demand based on who's clicking on it or how many people are clicking on it. So yeah, it is good. You got to be careful that you don't overdo it and that it doesn't end up in junk mail or you get blocked. It's a thin line of communications on where do you communicate too little or too much. But yeah, I personally think that email is better than print. Print, even in a trade magazine, is very limited. We've bought ads at trade shows and it has never resulted in actual sales. It looks good in the magazine, but most people don't take it with them. It's probably email is the most effective. The best is to develop a friendship or relationship with your buyer so they trust you, and that takes time. But keeping an email in front of them, keeping your name in front of them helps. And then there's a number of others. I don't think we talk about it in this course at all, but other services where, like I say, when I when somebody goes in and searches for dried mangoes, for example, if I'm selling dried mangoes, the next time they go into their website for their sporting event or their hotels or whatever, it'll show up as an ad there. And that similarly, you can track that. And we've done, for example, in our containers, about 1 million impressions, which means about 1 million times it's been seen. And we probably have, I think we're running at 0.67% click rate, which doesn't sound great because it's less than 1%, but we've got 1 million posts out there. So that still means it's 67,000 people have, or 6,700 people have gone to our website based off that. So it's a numbers game. And you got to make sure you have the right targeted audience. And that's something we continue to tweak and fine tune, is who that's going in front of. It doesn't do me any good to advertise my, stainless steel containers to a housewife because she's not going to buy them. So how do I get it to the right buyers? Now that's a challenge. That's something you always, kind of like website search optimization. You're always fine tuning it to try and attract the right buyers. Websites, you don't have a website, that's the first start. They have to have a website, and it has to be in English because no matter what country you're selling to, English is still the language of business, with few exceptions. If you're selling to Russia, then yeah, you don't need it in English. But if you're selling to Dubai or China or Europe or South America, English is the language that's going to get you there. So, and websites are critical.
Thanks, Jim.
Yep.
Jim, we have a question in the comments. So Gozelle is asking, what is the best way to find buyers? I know that we're going to have a separate session on that, but if you could just quickly tell her the most common way to find partners.
Yeah, we have a separate whole session on that. The best way is to know the market and to approach. We've shown the databases, for example, on ComSource and TradeMap, and we identified companies, drilling down to the companies that we did through some of the other databases where you can look at the company D&B and some of the others to identify who they are, and reaching out to them and consistently reaching out to them so that they can stay in front of them. Again, through Panjiva, for example, I can tell you who's importing your product in the markets. So if they're importing your product, then start going to them and consistently go to them. Offer them product, offer them prices, offer them crop updates. Like I say, they're already buying from somebody. You know that because you got the record of it, but you know who the buyers are. So it's a very targeted approach to say, okay, this company is buying this product from my competitor. I want to become their supplier. So you've identified who they are. Now you just have to get them to respond to you. And because they're buying from somebody else, like I say, the buyer, the supplier, the other supplier has to make a mistake in order for you to win the business. So that's where the consistent communications, I use MailChimp, but there's another one called Constant Contact, and that's basically you're in constant contact with the customer that you know should be buying your product. And there's like I say, we have a whole session on that. So that's a quick answer to a difficult question. Anything else?
Hi, Jim. I have one question. Can you tell us a little bit about digital platforms that we could use for export? I know that Amazon has B2B, Amazon B2B, for example. Have you used it? Is it good in your practice?
Yeah, we use Amazon, and Amazon is global now, and you can get global information from them. We have a whole nother course, which is not included in this, on how to utilize Amazon data. There are, similar to what Panjiva does for bills of lading, there are companies that do that for Amazon. So I can look at any product on Amazon and tell you how much of that product has sold in any given period of time. And I can tell what the cost to Amazon is and what the profit is to the export, not the profit, but the return on their sale is to the export, to the trader. So there's a lot of them. Just today I learned of 2 others here in the United States that specialize in food. They're popping up all over the world. Still, the consumption through a Amazon type retailer is still a very small percentage of the global supply of food products. Most people, if COVID wasn't here, most people would still be going to the grocery store every day or every week or whatever their pattern is to buy groceries. Few people would be buying product online, as many as there are now. The one company I was listening to today, they went from about 200,000 users to over 1 million users during COVID. So they quadrupled their customer base in 18 months, which is huge at those numbers. And it works for them. And if I'm selling something unique, for example, I cannot go to my local grocery store and get Lebanese olive oil or Tajikistan dried apricots. If I go to my local grocery store, I may get Del Monte apricots or Mariani apricots. But if I want something from Tajikistan, I can go on to Amazon and get it. So if I'm launching a new product, Amazon's a great place to gauge the market, and all the platforms are a great place to gauge the market. When we go to the fancy food show and we're talking to importers or distributors, one of the first questions they ask is, how are you doing on Amazon? Are you selling on Amazon? So it's become a gauge to whether the product can be successful or not. They provide great sources of information on packaging and styles and size and relative price, etc. So I like using them. I don't buy many groceries there. Like I say, the average American consumer doesn't buy many. It was funny, 2 years ago before COVID, I was at the fancy food show and everybody's, oh, Amazon. And they call it the, I'm blanking the name, but the channel for the e-commerce channel. And I'm like, I will never buy pickles online. Why would I just not go to my grocery store and buy them? Well, during COVID, I bought pickles online. But I bought Lebanese pickles. It wasn't my standard local pickle. The only place I could get it was going online. So when you're launching a product into a market, whether it's the European market or Indian market, or even Dubai now has Amazon delivery, and a lot of the retailers have online delivery. So it's a good avenue. Now, like a regular retailer, the online companies expect promotions from their suppliers. One company I was listening to today said basically you need to spend 20% a month going back to advertising and marketing on, and every 3 months you have to have a promotion. So there's a whole strategy on how to promote online, but it's growing. And like I say, here in the States, I don't know that most of the middle and upper middle class consumers are probably going to continue to use it. We still buy, not from Amazon, but our other regular groceries. We will buy them and they will pick the order in the store and deliver it to our car, or we can pay a service to deliver it to our house. And there's no reason for me to go into a grocery store anymore. Now that hurts the launch of new products, because when I went into the grocery store before, I would look and go, wow, here's a new pickle, or here's a new ketchup, or here's a new fruit. But when I order online, I'm just ordering what I am used to buying. So it's really become a challenge on how to launch new products online, because consumers are not going into the grocery store. What some of the retailers and some of the brands have done, when they deliver my order, there'll be a bag of free samples to try and introduce new products to me. So, and China has got the home delivery very large as well. I mentioned briefly Alibaba. And again, as an American, I don't use it that much because it's normally not product that I'm looking to buy. But it's a great place for me to look and see what is being sold and what prices and how the packaging and stuff is.
Mm-hmm. I was just wondering where I could find potential buyers, like where would be the places that I should target, maybe specific platforms. I know LinkedIn is very popular for it because I do get messages regularly from exporters. But I believe also every country probably has their own platform, but in general,
yeah, LinkedIn is great. The problem with LinkedIn is for you working with it individually, that's great. For me to do it as a group, it's tough because I can't communicate directly with the people. It has to be through their platform until I get their email and their dialogue going. So it's, from my standpoint, to introduce you to somebody through LinkedIn is difficult. But for you to go to LinkedIn and find it, is that now I just sent to our data team 8 websites that list companies and individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And they're doing the research right now to compare the 8 to determine which 1 or 2 of the 8 gives us the best information, because there are, like LinkedIn, there are websites where they will list I can go tell me all the buyers at Kraft, and it will give me their name, their email address, and their phone number. They're all fee-based, and I'm trying to figure out which one provides the most information. And those are all US centric. I don't know of any that are LinkedIn is international, but the rest of them all seem to be local buyers. You can find buyers. A good place to look for buyers, and we'll talk about this in the next session, is through trade shows. Even without going to the trade show, you can go on to the website, find the people that are handling your product, and offer them your product. So if there's a company that's importing tomatoes that's exhibiting at Gulf Foods in Dubai, well, there you go. or if they're at the Anuga, their information is there. They're trying, in most cases, they're trying to sell at the trade shows, but at a show like Fruit Logistica or Anuga, there are buyers there as well. So they're in that database from in the World or Trade Map. There's 5,550 companies listed there. And when we drilled down, you saw that I got to 326 or so tomato importers. So, again, that becomes your database. You put their emails into a Excel spreadsheet and you load them up to a MailChimp and you start contacting them.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anything else before I leave? Okay, it's 2 a.m. So I'm going to head to bed. Or no, 1 a.m., 1:05. I'm gonna head to bed. Ashwin is here and online. So I will turn it over to him. There's a number of slides left, about 15 or so, covering some of the same materials. A lot of the questions that you've asked and the questions that you'll continue to ask will fall into other sessions. I encourage you to go on to the International Digital University's website and sign into the course, because we've got all these materials and backup materials posted there. And in the next day or two, these recordings will be from these sessions as well. But all of the videos that I've played and all the materials that we have are available there on the site. So thank you all. I will not be here for the next session, but Ashwin's got a lot of experience in working this area and promoting trade, so I will turn the floor over to Ashwin.
Thank you, Jim.
And when you're done, just stop the recording and we'll all be happy.
Yep.
All right. Good night. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you, Jim. Bye.
Okay. All right, so I'll just let Jim shut his screen, and then I'll share mine. Or let me. Yeah, I can force it through, I think. Okay.
Yeah, I just stopped sharing, so you should.
Yeah, it's fine.
All right.
Okay,
All
so
right,
this
good night.
is, okay, cheers. This is where Jim left off. Just before I get into this, there was another question in the chat from Gozel about whether consultants do find specific buyers and negotiate. This is something that can be done. I mean, at 2020, we do, for example, organize matchmakings. We've been in trade fairs where we select a group of exporters. We identify buyers, and Jim mentioned that trade shows was a good place to identify buyers. And this is something that can be done. Now, what services you offer as a consultant can be very large. You can even go, yes, to the state of negotiating, but that you're mainly going into operating as an agent if you want. But this is possible, obviously. Now, so we'll continue with some of these platforms that can be used to gather information. I think you've understood that finding information, reliable information, is very important, especially when you're conducting your primary and secondary research as well. Jim has been through some of these platforms already, so I'll just go through a few more of them. And Eurostat is one of the European platforms that has been set up by the European Commission. It provides statistical data, not just on European countries, but it is a good source of information, even if you want to find information on other countries as well, because Eurostat provides information not only for European importers, but also for European exporters.
Just saying, your screen, I don't see your screen, so.
Don't you?
No.
Let me just.
Got it.
All right.
All right. Now I'm gone.
Good. Sorry. Okay, so yes, so Eurostat is, as I was saying, set up by the European Commission. It provides information to both EU importers, but also exporters. Therefore, even if you wanted to export to Russia and you wanted to find information, they do have information which has been prepared for EU exporters, which you can acquire. Not later than yesterday, I was trying to find out from the EU Statistics Office whether they had details about exports to Turkmenistan, for example, and they do have information that is already available. And remember that it is important to use such sources of information because they usually are reliable. And this is one of the important things when you're trying to dig for information, reliability of the data you are using. So if they have a small tutorial here about how to use their platform. Okay, well, basically it shows you how to do it. They don't have a recording on that, but they usually guide you through the database, how you can select information, whether you're looking for import data, export data. Basically, you can just follow. It's not a very long video, 3 or 4 minutes, but if you do go through that tutorial, it will explain to you how you can use data that is available on Eurostat. I won't go through it because there's nothing on the voice side. Now, depending on the market that you are targeting, I mean, a lot of these countries have now developed their own platforms. There is, for example, data that is available if you want to target China. Jim mentioned that customs data is a good source of information. It's probably the most reliable source of information. However, it does require that you go on every every customs office to find import information. But this is usually available throughout. So even China, which is a market that a lot of countries are eyeing nowadays, they have information that is available through this platform, for example. China is not the only one. We will see a few more of these. IHS, which has basically taken over the Global Trade Information Services, so this has been revamped now. It is also a good source of information and provide insights on value chains, competitive value chains, and so on. So this is another important source of data that you can use. Now, and this is also something that Jim mentioned, some sources of information are free, available for free, like the ITC and so on. But there are sources of information which unfortunately come at a fee. So it depends on the type of research that you want to conduct to be able to access one or the other source of information. InfoDrive India is a source of information that provides information not just on India. It gives information about trade in and out of India, but it also provides information on a few other countries like Vietnam, like Brazil, and China. Again, it is limited in terms of information that is available freely, but there are packages to which you can subscribe if you want to have additional information. Descartes Datamine is another one that was mentioned by Jim earlier on in terms of these agencies that do analyze bills of lading and so on. Again, this is a good source of information, but again, it comes at a fee. But obviously, there are information on pretty much countries across the 5 continents. So depending on the markets that you are targeting, you may decide to choose X or Y source of information because it does provide information with regards to your target markets. Import Radar is another one. It basically tracks shipping activity, so movement of ships going from in and out the country, from one country to the other. It usually provides fairly updated information because it tracks movement of ships. Therefore, as soon as a vessel reaches destination, they try to update their database. So it is also very interesting as a tool to understand competitors' value chain. So they also have information on on several countries, as you can see from the list here. So again, one important source of information that you can use. Now, it is important basically when you are analyzing, we've looked at conducting primary research, it is important to have proper information about what we call seller data. So this is information that pertains to a seller. A seller can be a primary producer, the guys who are producing vegetables and fruits. or some of the intermediaries across the value chain. So we'll discuss more of this in the next session. But it is important for you as a consultant to understand how the market is structured, who are the various intermediaries in a value chain, and basically what kind of markups is usually attributed to one or the other of these intermediaries across the value chain. So as I mentioned, this is something we're going to see in the next sessions as well. But it is important to understand that there are multiple players. It is important for you to understand how all this is structured. So now, why do you need seller data? And when you're looking at seller data, it's not just prices and markups. It is also the production capacity. Because before you go and assist a company to find customers, for example, or to identify a market that is appropriate for this company, it is important for you to understand whether they have the right supply capacity. So if, for example, the company you are trying to assist is only producing 1 or 2 containers of products, you are not going to target a market that is willing to accept 100 or 200 containers. So this matchmaking is important for you to be able to understand the market. You need to have the right information from the source and from the customer you're trying to assist. So obviously prices, as I mentioned, what are the intermediaries, what are the markups along the value chain, but also it is essential to understand what is the supply capacities that is available. So basically, it will help you, as I mentioned, to relate to the capabilities of the market. So you know that you're taking a company in a market that is fit for him or her. You will be able also to identify what assistance they require. For example, there was a question earlier about whether it was necessary to conduct primary research systematically. And Jim rightly mentioned that it is advisable, because even if you are usually exporting from, say, a product from Turkmenistan, fresh fruits, and you're exporting to Dubai, for example, and you want to export a processed food to the same market. The requirements of the market in terms of processed foods and in terms of fresh fruits are not the same. Therefore, what assistance you will need to be able to provide to your customer, for example, in terms of upgrading their packaging, in terms of upgrading the labels, adapting the labels to market requirements, will be important for you. Therefore, understanding seller data is also necessary and very important. It will also help maximize the benefits of the project that you're trying to assist. Again, if you're trying to organize a matchmaking, the more information you have, the better you will be in a position to find the right partner for your customers. So where do you get seller data? Obviously, the first source of information are from the companies themselves. They know better than anybody what are the production capacity, what are their operational costs, how much at what cost they were able to sell their products. So this is the first source of information, and you should request this information from them and be very thoughtful about them. Sometimes they try not to give too much, but this is the most important and most reliable source of information you'll be able to have. So the companies will be your primary source of information. Then you've got institutions, agencies, export agencies, for example. They also have access to some information. I am in Mauritius, and for example, the Ministry of Agriculture here has developed a database which captures for each month of the year what is the level of production that we are going to have for each crop. You see, so this is an important source of information again, because if you're going to assist and to look at exporting, it is important, as I mentioned, to have proper information about your supply capacity. This will also help you advise your customers or companies that you're trying to assist how they should orient their production. Because if you know that there is going to be a shortage in a specific crop, you could eventually advise them, if you're going to target X country or X market, this is where you should focus some of your production. So it is important to have basic information. And then also from market research, from the trade, from the various database that we've mentioned. You've got export data, for example, if you're looking at Turkmenistan, you've got export data that is available at the level of customs. Websites that have been mentioned, journals, but very specific journals, or newsletters, which are usually published by specific agencies. They would usually be able to provide you with information that is updated and reliable. So, on the other hand, you've got to also understand what the buyers are looking for and data from the buyer's perspective. So let me just show you this quick video.
Continuing with our example on tomatoes, through our research, we've identified, for example, that United Arab Emirates is a potential customer for our product. We didn't know that there are Carrefour stores there, or we can do a search to determine what retailers are there. We do a search, we plug in tomatoes here, and it brings up our dashboard. The dashboard, if you look on the left here, it'll have countries of origin. Now, this is unusual for Carrefour. Not all companies have this. Sometimes you have to dig deeper, but this is really nice. It allows you to see kind of a pattern of where they're getting the product from. You can see some of the product is domestic, some of it is imported, the Netherlands, and some of it, you look here at Malaysia and UAE, which means they can alter sources depending on what they have available and the timing. So I've already opened a few of the tabs. We'll take a look at it here. We look at tomatoes bunch. It has the price here. Though the price is not something that we can base our export prices on. We really need to, and we'll talk about this in the pricing section, base our export prices on our cost, not on what the retailer is selling for, because we don't always know why they're selling at that level. But you can get an idea. This is a yellow tomato. You can zoom in on it, but you can look at the details, look at competing products, look at how they're packaging it, what information is there. Here's another one. This is a value-added product. And this is a bucket, and it is from Spain. Now, I don't know if the bucket is actually being packed in Spain or if it's being shipped in bulk to UAE and being packaged there. Again, you get a relative information on the price. You know where it's from. You can look at the different packaging and try and determine if that's something that you want to compete with or are able to compete with. And here's another example. Again, this particular product, the origin is United Arab Emirates or Malaysia. So they will switch origins depending on what they have available and the timing. Again, you can get a relative idea on the price. You can get how many pieces per kg, which will really help you in determining when and how to harvest your product. And you can look at relative flows based on what product is coming from what markets.
Okay, so what you understand from this is that if you are able to conduct your research properly, there are some sources such as Carrefour. This is not information that you find very often with regard to the origin of specific products that they are selling, especially on the website. But they do have, and your research can guide you to find very specific data, and then you've even got information regarding their prices. So you're already in a capacity to understand whether the product that you're trying to support, that you're trying to get across to a new market, will be competitive or not. So the seller in that case is the one pretty much down the value chain, which is the supermarket. And you are able to work out, provided that you know how the value chain is structured, you are able to work out, working backwards, whether your product will be competitive. So it is important, again, to understand what is seller data and where you can find such information. Now,
continuing with our example on tomatoes, through our research.
Now this is a small, let me just go through this first and then I'll comment afterwards.
Okay, now that we've done research, we're back to being able to work on our export strategy plan. So we can begin by coming down here to where we left off, which was the section on here, export to market strategy. So you want to plug in the year there. That's first thing off. And then most popular markets based on the data that you've worked on from TradeMap and from your research on the other databases.
I'm sorry to interrupt. This video was shown the last session, so everyone is familiar with this video, and it's on IDU's website. And yeah, and we have 3 minutes left, so if you could quickly wrap it up this session, I would very much appreciate it.
No problem. We'll just skip this one. So basically, what it is important to understand that conducting primary research on the market is a process that is all-encompassing, that goes from research at the level of the company first, and then goes down to the end of the value chain. So it is important for you to understand, as consultants, you need to know your customer, and your customer being the company trying to assist to export. You need to understand what their process is, what their product is, what their production capacity is, prices at which they are able to supply. Hello.
Ashwin, we can hear you. Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, so understand what the supply chain is about, identify the potential for a specific product based on market research that you have conducted using some of the sources of information and databases that have been mentioned to you. There is a lot of public data that is available out there, some at a fee or against a fee, but a lot of information is available for free. Jim mentioned that not all the information is reliable. There are various factors to take into consideration. For example, analysis of bill of lading. If you look at ITC TradeMap, for example, they will use the exchange rate at a specific moment in time. If you analyze at a different moment in time, the exchange rate may have fluctuated and figures do not tally exactly, but still it is a source of information that will provide you with a fairly good level of information that you can use in your research. Important to understand market data and your market requirements as well. What are the requirements of the market itself? For a good to penetrate a country, are there any restrictions? What are the requirements of your buyers as well? Some may have requirements which are linked with the type of information that has to be provided on the label, for example. Very important. And obviously, it is important to review your company data, update it as and when you go along. Things change depending on the market that you are trying to assist, you are trying to penetrate. things will change. You can't use information based on the primary research for Japan when you're also doing a research on Russia, for example. So these are basically what we have to say. So in order to summarize, it is important, as we mentioned, to really understand the company that you are assisting, ins and out. You need to have information from them at all levels. Once you have been able to understand the company, understand the supply capacity and so on, you will be able then to research the market that you want to penetrate through online resources that are available, through interviews. Reference was made, for example, to LinkedIn to find buyers, or using information from trade fairs. Visit the market in person. So, for example, when I was working for the Export Promotion Agency here in Mauritius, we were conducting market surveys. We were taking products from various companies with a pricing as well. We were going to meet buyers, understand whether the quality, the price, and everything matches. So this is also something that has to be done to some extent. And obviously, you need to find buyers, if you are going into that direction, that will match your companies in terms of products and in terms of quantities that can be supplied, and of course, on the basis of price as well. That will be discussed at another session. So that is it for this session. I don't know if you've got any questions on the latest slides, but I think most of it was covered anyway by Jim.
Thank you, Ashwin. I think, as Jim said, we can stop the recording now so that it doesn't keep recording until Jim comes back. Tomorrow's session, so we have another session tomorrow at the same time. It will be about export approaches and value chains. Thank you all for attending today's session. I'll send you all a calendar invite shortly. Thank you.